Hello and welcome to another episode of Extra Vibes, the show that gives you extra content.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasey.
Oh yes,
I enjoy
sticking
it.
with
Yes.
that intro still. It's what we've got.
If it's not broken,
Exactly. I mean, we've already hit perfection at this point, so
that's it. We're enjoying these extra vibes, aren't we? Well, I am. I hope you are as well. I hope this isn't going to make things awkward. I hate it. It's so rough.
Yeah,
It's rough being in your company. It's rough.
No, yeah, it's been really cool, and we've had some episodes that have had some really good reception. So we thought we'd carry that on with something a little bit different. We're doing the top 10 kind of most underrated albums. And that could be potentially ever. So there's a huge timeline there.
And as always, this is always myself and Mr. Vasey's sort of own opinion. I think by underrated albums, it's important to insert disclaimer here in terms of what we perceive underrated albums as. Because for me, an underrated album sometimes the following of that band appreciates it as being one of their strongest albums, but the actual reception and the reach that album had wasn't deserving of how awesome it was.
Yeah,
and I think there's quite a few of them where that'd be the situation.
and I think even if an album's been given positive reviews, it can still be underrated in its own right. Like if we feel it's a classic album, like a top tier album, but it's not considered that, but it has good reviews, that's still underrated in our opinion, I think.
100%. In the same way that an album that's perhaps maybe not a classic album was perceived as one because the band themselves are classic. That for me would fall into the realms of being an overrated album. It's the same sort of thing. So yeah, it's another one where the beauty of these top tens is it's made us sweat, hasn't it? It's made us really think. I was on the phone to my dad.
Yeah.
Mid-cut, like literally just about to record, I went, I'm going to have to ring my dad.
Don't have to, yeah. Just can't.
I used to phone a dad. Just to go, I'm not missing anything, am I? Just to make sure, because I think that's the hardest thing.
Well, you fell in the trap last time, didn't you? I thought it would have been me last time with the top 10 guitarists, but forgetting.
I was so pissed off when you said Richie Faulkner.
Yeah, we could see it. I mean, when I was editing it, there was a moment where I was like, do I slow this reaction down? Just to capture the moment, But so we believe that we possibly avoided one of those glaring errors. I think, anyway.
Yes.
So with that in mind, I'm going to jump in with some honourable mentions before we get into like the actual list itself.
Fantastic.
For me, I've gone in that didn't make it into the top 10. I've started off with Deep Purple's Burn. Obviously, when David Coverdale came in, for me, it's one of those like I don't feel it's underrated enough now.
Yeah.
Because obviously over time people obviously love David Coverdale.
Whitesnake always used to open with Burn, and they do and then they do Stormbringer, which is another Coverdale Purple album. So I think that's giving it a bit of relevance. But it's a great choice. I'm one of my favorite Deep Purple albums. Yeah,
and at the time, like the reason why it's in my honorable mentions, at the time when it came out, there was loads of people that was like, this is shit, or I don't like this, because it's just
the change.
Yeah. There's a bit of a change of tone. Another honorable mention for me would be a very new band. It's not actually an album, it's an EP, hence why it's not in the list. But I think it's underrated at the moment. It's a self-titled EP by a new band called the Georgia Thunderbolts.
Oh, I know Georgia Thunderbolts.
They've got like a very kind of Leonard Skinner vibe, very early kind of Skinner vibe.
Do you want a bit of trivia?
Oh, here we go. Go on.
So the guy who's been gigging with Blackstone Cherry is the guitarist out of the Georgia Thunderbolts. The guy who's been replaying him instead of John, the original bass player who's just left.
Yeah, but yes, their EP is it's very good. It's obviously very early Leonard Skinner vibes, strong with that. But it was interesting that like I went on Spotify and I was looking at this list, and they were, I've listened to them recently, and their view count, well, their listen counts are very low. So I thought, give them a mention in my underrated.
Yeah, it's a good shout, man.
So
good shout.
Yeah. So yeah, have you got any honourable mentions, or are we jumping in?
Not many. I'd have Queen's second album.
Mm-hmm.
I think Queen's first two albums are vastly underrated, because a lot of people kind of see Sheer Heart Attack as the start of them, because that's when they went kind of very sort of English, sort of eccentricity, but theatrical and very creative. And whereas them first two albums are pretty solid rock albums. Queen 2 in particular is just really heavy for the time, and I think that gets past really quickly. I'd have Blackstone Cherry, Magic Mountain. I see that as part of that initial sort of before the drop off. I kind of still would include that. It's the last album they did on Roadrunner, and I think after when they left Roadrunner, I think that's for me when it kind of dropped off a little bit. Whereas I still see Magic Mountain as very much kind of, but I think that was mainly due to the fact that I was still very much in love with the band at that point, But there's some great songs on it. Dance Girl, Let Me See You Shake. Magic Mountain as a song's awesome. It's got some little Hammond organ on it. Me and Mary Jane, I love that album, man. I'd have Marcus King. Give me honorable mentions.
we had this joke at the start. I says, "Is he going to complete the trilogy?"
I didn't put him in. Didn't put him in. But I should have him in my honourable mentions.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I'd have.
I'd
rather the Marcus King. I'll have the Marcus King Band's debut album, because at that point he wasn't very well known, and that debut album is some of the best musicianship I've ever heard. So yeah,
bold statements.
Let's dive into it. Top 10. You may go first.
Oh, I was going to throw you first, but okay.
Ladies first.
My number 10. I'm starting off with a band that I've recently got back into after we did an interview with them. It's The Treatment, and it's their fourth album, Power Crazy. It it crept straight under my radar. Like, I hadn't heard it for a long, long time. I only heard like a couple of tracks off it, not the entire album start to finish. And obviously when we did the interview with Danny, I listened to it before, and I listened to it. I thought, this is actually a banging album. It's really raw. It's got that classic kind of rock vibe with the AC/DC sound, and it's just a really strong comeback album, I think, for them.
What year did it come out? Right? Which singer was it? Do you know? At that point,
it's with the current guy now.
Was it his first record then?
Yeah. It's his first one. So it's kind of, as I say, it's their kind of comeback album towards that original sound that he talked about in the interview. And yeah, I think it's just really underrated. It didn't really do much. I remember when it came out, I wasn't aware that it was even released until like a year afterwards. So it had like not a lot of press for it. So that's my number 10.
I mean, it's a good, strong number 10. I mean, I'd be often to say that The Treatment's most recent album could perhaps be underrated, because it feels like it's not been as well perceived as myself and you expected it would be, with respect to The Treatment boys, mainly because we just think the album's really strong, don't we,
Yeah.
It must be that current lineup with that new singer, if you feel Power Crazy is on that same level, hopefully hopefully they'll stick with him, and that next album will be as well perceived as it deserves to be. My number 10 is Rush's debut album.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we watched a bit of Beyond the Light Stage, the Rush documentary, and into Rush's first album, the original drummer is a lot more rockier than anything else. That kind of, you see the progression, because second album's kind of, which I think is Fly By Night, is very much like, that's when Neil Peart came in, and he took over a lot of the lyric duties, and that was more this sort of storytelling, very sort of fantasy element, and that naturally then made it, the whole thing more progressive. But that first Rush album, man, is, I said to Hartwell, singer for me, Rivers, because he hates Rush, And we always pretend
I
that
was
they're
the
his
same, wasn't I?
favourite band.
Where I didn't hate them per se, but they were never to my taste. And then you were like, check out the first Rush album because it's
Unbelievable.
and it's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
really
it's
enjoy
killer,
it.
man. Like it's a really strong,
Mm,
heavy rock album,
yeah.
and to have Geddy Lee's vocals over, and it's heavy as hell as well, like for
Mm.
that time as well. So I'd always recommend, if you're not a big Rush fan, check out Rush's
On that
first
first
album.
one. Mm.
Yeah, it was killer. And I'd say I have them in at number 10.
Mm. My number 9, I'm going to a European band. It's a band called Brainstorm. They're a kind of a metal band.
Good name.
Yeah, I know, it's a killer name.
Good name.
And in about 2003, they released an album which is, for me, has been above anything they've ever done and anything they've done since. It's called Liquid Monster.
Another good name.
I know they're killer on these names, but it's just. I mean, the vocalist, I can't remember his name, but he's got an absolutely killer voice. There's a kind of a Priest influence in there. But this album in particular, Liquid Monster, it's there's not a weak song on it. It's very strong, start to finish, and it feels epic. It fits with the name, it's got this epic, massive, heavy sound. And it arcs back to like I feel like if it was released in perhaps like the 80s, like around that kind of that British heavy metal thing, around that period of time, it would have just like been right up there. But because of that 03 era where it was kind of metal wasn't really a big thing, it was all this new metal stuff around that time. I think it got buried. Which is unfortunate. Yeah, I believe they're a German band, and they've got a good following in Europe and stuff, but not, they haven't really transitioned over into the UK and America. Like they haven't got that commercial side, but it's a killer album, so they get my number 9.
I'll check it out, man. That sounds. I mean, I think that's the ultimate compliment is if it's strong from start to finish. Because normally in most albums you get a couple of what's always known as filler tracks, and to be able to have something that doesn't lose the momentum from start to finish is a massive compliment.
It's got so many shades in it. Like, I mean, metal is difficult, isn't it? Because it can become quite samey.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't, and like the first track. The vocalist just like grabs you by the balls straight away. You're like, fucking hell, like straight off. I remember when I heard it for the first time, I was quite young, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, it made you feel like a badass. So yeah,
that's cool. I like that. My number 9 is Trouble, with their 4th album, which was self-titled. So I got into trouble from my dad, and this album in particular for a track called Misery Shows, which is just a fucking unbelievable track. And Trouble are one of them bands where like they're very much like a normally the people in classic thrash bands like Hetfield's a massive Trouble fan. They're kind of this. They're a bit like the Testament are in some regards, that they're kind of like the band that all the famous bands are into, and kind of never really hit it to that mainstream audience. And this album in particular is just the ultimate point for me in terms of their sound. It's heavy, it's thrashy, but it's got that thing that obviously Metallica started to bring in as well, in terms of having the ballads and bringing it down and having these awesome kind of elements of songwriting and that very classic metal sound as well come through to it. And the lead singer's just so cool. He's like a mixture of Jim Morrison and but with a thrash vocal.
I was going to say, how does that work in a thrash band?
They're very Faith No More. Like, if you think of Faith No More, sort of like with the song Epic, which is probably their biggest song, it's on that sort of sonic level, in that it's just really creative as well as being very cool and very heavy at the same time. So yeah, definitely recommend that, because I feel like enough people don't know Trouble as a band and that album in particular.
That's cool. I'll check them out, because I've not heard of Trouble. So they're a new one for me. My number 8, I'm going to a band that is very well known, but when this album came out, everybody was like, "What the hell is this? It's crap." But looking back on it now, and people are starting to look back on it now, it's actually a very good album. It's Metallica with Load. Can you remember Load?
Yeah, I never really got into Load or Reload.
See, I didn't like Reload, but I like Load. It's
when they went a bit hard rocky,
yeah. It's like hard rock, and particularly in like documentaries in the past, you see the reaction because obviously they're known for being essentially like a thrash metal band. Yeah. They did Load, and people were like, "What is this?" Like there was panning reviews, people saying it's terrible.
Disgraceful.
Yeah, like all this kind of horrific reception. And I thought, it was a really good album. If you disregard the fact it's Metallica, or
that's the issue, isn't it?
If you think, I don't know, it's the members of Metallica on a side project or something like that. If because it doesn't have that typical Metallica vibe, but
do you reckon it was the natural progression from the Black Album though? Because the Black Album was before Load and Reload, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that was naturally a bit more of a rockier sound.
Yeah, it was like they went kind of from thrash to just like metal, and then they've gone from like metal to like hard rock.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was a natural progression. I feel like it was moving in that direction. I think they wanted to keep trying and see where they can go with it. And I admire the ballsiness to go and do that.
Yeah.
Because I imagine they weren't overly shocked with some of the responses. I think they probably knew that some thrash fans wouldn't be a big fan. Yet they went and did it anyway, which I respect them for that.
So we always talk a lot about the difficulty if you've got that creativity in you and you want to get it out. I always respect bands for doing that because at least they can feel proud that they did that at the time they felt it was needed, rather than just writing a thrash album for the sake of it. They might have then disappeared with a lot of them sort of late 80s thrash bands that struggled a little bit in the 90s and particularly the 2000s, whereas Metallica kind of reigned supreme.
Yeah, and it's like there's some songs that have still survived in their set list now, like in King Nothing, and there's a few others in there that have survived. So I think people look back on it now and go, it's not that bad now.
It's not that bad.
Well, like some thrash fans are even a bit like, it's not as bad as what I thought initially. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good for what it was. So it gets my number 8.
Cool. Mine is a similar band, similar time, Testament with The Ritual. Yeah. So similar to a bit like with Load and Reload is that now Testament hate this album. They very rarely play any songs off it, and I think it's their best album. And I think there's a song on it called Electric Crown, and I think it's the most underrated metal song of all time. It's honestly, it's got one of the best guitar solos in the world. It's just, I can remember hearing it when I was about 6 or 7 years old and my dad playing it. And it was probably one of the first times I can remember thinking about wanting to play guitar. The guitarist Alex Skolnick does this thing where he follows the vocal melody in the chorus. So he's basically playing what the vocal melody sings in the guitar solo. And I just love that. I was hypnotized by it. So it's got the songs Electric Crown on it, which was the lead single. They never play that live. You see them now, it'd be very rare they'd play that. And this album was basically them trying to be Metallica.
Yeah.
They purposely wrote it to try and become more of a mainstream thrash band, a more mainstream metal band. It's also got Return to Serenity on it, which they still play every now and then, which is more of a ballady sort of, the Unforgiven sort of style. But yeah, I just think because of the fact it was because Testament were probably even more extreme than Metallica in terms of that Bay Area thrash, and I think to come out of an album like this in the 90s just pissed off so many fans that it kind of got lost for how good an album it is and how good they were at writing that sort of material, So I definitely recommend it because it's a great album as the gateway to Testament. If you can't deal with the heavier side of it, this is so much more melodic and it's awesome.
That's a fair shout. I haven't heard it. So I'll go and give it a try because I have this thing where I feel that Testament, for my taste, are a bit too far down that road. So maybe that might be a bit more of a palatable one for me.
Cool.
Number 7 for me is one of Zack Wild's side projects. It's Pride and Glory. It's just self-titled Pride and Glory.
Oh, that's a good shout.
It's got this real like southern like rock vibe, which is obviously quite a departure from what people would associate him for, with Ozzy and like obviously now with Black Label Society. Yeah. And it's one of those that not a lot of people like really mention, or it doesn't seem to have done a lot over the years. But it's interesting that every so often some of the songs off there creep back into some re-release material that's now dubbed as like, Zack Wild just himself, or they come back around. So obviously he rates that material. I really enjoyed it. I heard it when I was quite young, and it's just a different flavor. I thought it was a really solid album. If people aren't aware of it, go and check it out. I think it's one of the best things he's done, purely because it's like, again, it's that creative thing. He's gone outside of his box, and I admire that. So yeah, that's my number 7.
No, that's a great shout, man. No, I've got no problems with that. My number 7 is Jethro Tull, Heavy Horses. So Tull, a lot of people kind of think of Jethro Tull and they think of them albums in the early 70s, particularly Thick as a Brick and Aqualung. And Aqualung's kind of one of the classic albums of the 70s. And when they came back in the late, just before the 80s, in the late 70s, people kind of had brushed them off at this point. Whereas Heavy Horses, for me, is just such a wonderful creative album. It plays on this very sort of English eccentric nuances, which Ian Anderson does ever so well. Like the lyrics to Heavy Horses, I'm not going to do them properly because I'm terrible at remembering lyrics, but like, I hold Heatherfield pounding the dust, a warm summer's day towards evening. I love that creative, very eccentric lyricism, which can only be done by certain people. And Ian Anderson does it superbly. And that whole album's just full of like just wonderful songs, and it kind of goes into folky, but it's heavy as well. Like there's some real riffs in there, and Martin Barr, the guitarist, was just starting to get into effects, so you have a bit of like delay in there and stuff. And I just think it's such a lost album, particularly for Tull fans that maybe had lost them at that point because they'd kind of been gone and then resurrected. And for me, this should be up there as one of the classic Tull albums, of their career, and it just isn't held in that regard. So 100% recommend that, definitely.
Fair enough. My number 6, I'm going back right to the kind of into my childhood, and strangely it tied back around into Beyond the Vibe. I'm going with Roadstar, Grand Hotel. It's one of those albums that at the time was very popular. They got like Best New Band, I believe, on the Classic Rock. But over the years, they've really that album's got a bit lost. And I think it's really unfortunate because obviously we had Richie on the podcast, and he's a great singer. I feel it's a really strong debut album as well. It was, it's got a strong mix. There's not really a weak track on it, I don't think. I remember listening to it when I was a kid, and I was like, this is my band. You talk about with Blackstone Cherry. Yeah. And I had this with Roadstar at the time, and they just felt like my band, and it was the first one for me. So it really sticks in your head, doesn't it, when you get an album that you really vibe on? But I think it's just kind of disappeared over time, and if you mention it now to somebody, they've probably forgotten about them, or don't know.
We said that to Richard, didn't we? That the albums had been lost a little bit, and he kind of acknowledged that it's a shame as well, that, like you said, I agree with all the points you'd made. I think it's such an awesome album, and it's such a shame that people won't enjoy it the same way that we enjoyed it.
Yeah, but yes, I implore people to go and check that out. It is available in the YouTube world. It's still knocking about. So, go and find it.
I agree. I feel like I'm the old boy here. I'm 100% like pushing. It's not entirely my dad's influence because my dad kept saying things, and I'd go, "Listen, this is my list. Like, I need to feel like I've got this connection. Like, this isn't your list." And he'd go, "Well, what about Van Morrison?" I go, "Get out, get gone." All right. But this is I'm another old band. Very, my third ever gig was this band, and I was actually taught guitar by the guy who played guitar in them for sort of their last amalgamation, or one of their last guitarists. It's Budgie, and it's the album Bandolier. And the reason I picked this album, again, it's probably the album that, as we kind of said in the preface before we got into the list, is I think if you're a Budgie fan, this is probably their greatest album. But for me, in terms of the the classic albums of the 70s, people don't acknowledge this, and it's an awesome album. It's Bandolier. It had it's got Breaking All the House Rules on there. It's got Ain't No Mountain, which was covered by Iron Maiden on a B-side many years ago. So Maiden understood the influence. And for me, the ultimate thing is it's got Napoleon Boner, part 1 and 2 on it, which is just for me it's probably my top 20 greatest ever rock songs. Like, I just think it's epic. It's so epic. I mean, in the early days of the Vibe, we did
we did.
I can't remember what we did. Did we do underrated rock songs?
I think it was like underrated rock tracks or something.
Yeah, and I had Napoleon Boner for that reason, because it was just I just felt like it was just such an awesome song. So yeah, Budgie as a band is just underrated, very classically known for being underrated.
I was going to say they've, as a band as a whole, haven't they? They've kind of become known as being the underrated band, which is a strange anomaly, because it's, how can you be known as being underrated? It's a weird one, but it's a fair shout. My number 5, this is another band that's kind of disappeared. I recently discovered they are actually still going, but they dropped off the face of the earth for years. Again, it's an early, I believe it's like 2000s band again. They were called the Parlor Mob.
I remember them. I remember the name, yeah.
Yeah, and their debut album, and You Were a Crow. It was a really strong debut album. I think the strange thing with them is that I feel if they were to release that today under this like new wave of classic rock thing, it would do really well. It's one of those, because it has this classic rock vibe, but it's modernized.
Yeah.
And it again, it's produced really well. It's got great songs on it. They're very catchy. And it's just got lost. It got buried in that kind of, we talked about that. There's kind of there was a first wave when we had like Roadstar and The Answer.
Didn't have the same longevity of the current new wave of classic rock, but there was definitely a first there's a little tide, a little bit of water, ripple. Just a ripple. Yes, that was the word I was looking for, Mr. Bately, a ripple.
But yes, they kind of got lost in that for a bit, but and I think they had some problems with the record label at the time and all this kind of stuff. So they dropped off the face of the map after this album, and it's a killer album. Again, go check it out if you're into like classic rock, if you like a bit of Led Zeppelin, if you like all those kind of like top old school classic rock bands, but you want something with a bit of a modern edge, go and listen to that. That's my number 5.
Cool. My number 5, again, it's probably an album that if you were around at that time and into the band, it's probably their classic album. But similar to what you said with the Parlor Mob, right? It's a band that never really got the label, never really got the record quality of recording they deserved, but are kind of acknowledged as being sort of one of the pivotal bands for a lot of influence for people. And it's Diamond Head with Borrowed Time. So I remember getting this album on vinyl when I was about 10 or 11, and I can remember when I put it on thinking, oh, this sounds the recording quality is shit. And I think they were on MCA for many years, and when bands were getting picked up like Maiden and stuff, Diamond Head were always on the same level, with Angel Witch and Praying Mantis and all that. But And the material was better than some of them bands. Like I think the material was head and shoulders above sort of like Praying Mantis, No Discredit, and Angel Witch, but they just never got the quality of recording to take them to that next level. I mean, on that album, you've got Borrowed Time, you've got Call Me, and then you've got Am I Evil, which is
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
covered by Metallica and kind of probably made famous
Mm,
by Metallica, and it's for me, it's just one of the most classic riffs, metal riffs,
yeah, it is,
recognizable, very simple, and and people barely know that it's a Diamond Head. Never mind what album it's off. So yeah, it's as much as I think people on the new wave British heavy metal probably see this as one of the top albums from around that time. I think just in terms of the fact that people probably don't listen to it now, and it's kind
mm,
of been lost in terms of like the classic albums.
yeah.
We'll get taken into by young fans of now, and I just want this Diamond Head Borrowed Time to be part of that, that gets passed on and still celebrated, because it's a wonderful collection of great, new wave British heavy metal songs.
And there'll be kids now that'll be seeing Metallica's version of Am I Evil and just thinking, oh, that's a Metallica song.
Mm.
Gets a bit lost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I do see your point now. My number 4, there's a sad story with this one. It's mad. It's Andrew Stockdale with Keep Moving. It was his first solo album that he did. Obviously, he's known more for Wolfmother, where he had like a good strong stint with them. But yeah, he did this solo album, and it had this. He brought in, I believe, there's an interview where he talks about it. He brought in a few people that had like no previous experience.
Like that.
Yeah, to like essentially market it and put it out, and he had trouble with the record label, and it actually reached a point where it was obviously released, but then it got pulled off Spotify, and it got pulled off everywhere essentially. So it disappeared for about 5 years. Barely anybody could find it. You can't see it anywhere. And then it's reappeared just last year again. It got like re-released.
Wow.
And he lost a load of money. He had to like sell a load of like guitars and
No, that's never
all
good.
of that. Yeah, like it was terrible for him. But the album itself is a really good, strong album, and it's got this classic rock vibe, and he experiments a bit in there, but it's got like it's not just Wolfmother, it's his own thing, and again it's that creative thing that he's doing, and yeah, it's really enjoyable, and it was a shame that it just kind of it didn't even make a ripple. It did nothing.
Yeah, like I couldn't, 100% before. I mean, when you mentioned it to me when we first met, and I didn't know it'd come out, and I think and I've listened to it from your recommendation, and I agree. It's very difficult when you've got such a recognizable style and voice as Andrew Stockdale in order to do a solo project and it not sound like Wolfmother, because I think people naturally relate the band to his voice and his overall style, whereas I think he does really well to give it, as you say, his own sound. So yeah, it's a shame.
Like a lighter thing. It's not as heavy as Wolfmother.
No.
But yeah, it's a shame. I haven't heard a story about like an album essentially plummeting before it's even released in quite a long time. So yeah, that's my number 4, and go and listen to it on Spotify. It's got mad low listens. Go and listen to it. Great.
My number 4 is the Four Horsemen. Didn't do that on purpose either. Tied in nicely. With the album Nobody Said It Was Easy. So the Four Horsemen came out on they were on Geffen Records, which is what the label that were around on the late 80s, early 90s, that had bands like Junkyard and Guns N' Roses released their first album through Geffen. And they were really, and I was massively into this sort of sound when I was about 13, 14, that very sleazy, sort of like the Dirty Honey sound, right? Very much sort of your taste as well. And but the Four Horsemen had this real sort of like dirty southern bar vibe about them. They were a lot more bluesy and a lot more simple and southern. And basically, as far as I understand the story, it was the bass player from the Cult, and he left because he wanted to play guitar, and he formed the Four Horsemen. And the first time I saw them was for a track called "Rockin' Is My Business," right? And
Yes, I've heard this.
it's the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. They had a drummer, and all he had was a hi hat, a snare drum, and a cymbal, and like he's just literally just doing that. And they're all like playing Les Pauls and got long hair and cowboy hats and smoking. And the album's just class. It's got this kind of Black Crowes kind of thing about it, where it's kind of quite chord based, like Rolling Stones on cocaine, but with that slight southern tinge. So it takes a lot of the elements that I like, and yeah, it's just, I feel that because it was just a little drop in the water, nobody really kind of appreciated it, and it's just been lost. But it's such a cool, like, just killer album, man. I 100% recommend it for anyone that's into that sort of sound.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that you mentioned that I'd never even heard of. So I think it is what you said. Like it didn't really break through, did it?
I think they just got lost in them. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
bands doing that sort of thing at the time because Guns came out and did it and was so successful. It was just a lot jumped on it, and I think they probably just got lost. I think somebody died. Pretty sure somebody died as well. So I don't think it was ever destined to give them the credibility they deserve. But 100% recommend it if you're into sleazy bluesy southern rock. Four Horsemen.
That's a fair shout. Top three.
Top three.
The three. Getting serious. My number three. It's had high praise, but maybe more so over here. It's kind of underrated than America, perhaps. I don't know. But it's the Raconteurs with Helpless Stranger. Over here, it's done nothing, has it? Like
I didn't even hear about it being released, man.
No. And this is it. Like in America, I believe they went on like a press thing. They obviously doing the whole go on chat shows, do all that kind of thing. But over here, I mention it to people, and some people don't even know they've got a new album out. It's just nothing, is it? Like,
you showed it me, man, and I loved it, and I've showed people, and they love it, and it's just like as soon as you show people, they immediately appreciate it for how good it is. It's just because they've never been shown it before. They didn't even know. It's just such a shame for such a wonderful album.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're kind of a bit of a super group of sorts with Jack White in there and stuff, but yeah, it has so many layers. It's just a really well structured album, varied, and for me, it's right up there with like it's in the top tier of modern rock albums for me. Yet every time I mention it, people are like, "What?" They don't know. So
definitely,
yeah, that's my number.
Underrated, isn't it?
It has to be for that reason. As I say, in America, people may know it widely, but over here, it's a different story, unfortunately. So yes, that's my number three.
Cool. My number three is one you've already mentioned, is Roadstar Grand Hotel. I really echo what you said, man. It's weird how we met and immediately had that sort of comparison. It's they for me as well. They were kind of like my first band, them and Blackstone. I listened to that album like religiously, and I was really young, and obviously I wasn't in a band and anything. I just kept pretending that I was in that band. I'd sit in the car with my headphones on and close my eyes, and I'd think about playing the songs and stuff. And it was, I think about Let's Get It Started, Ready to Go, Roadstar, Out of the Blue, even Misplaced Paradise. Like I just love that album. Like I genuinely hold a really soft place in my heart. I remember seeing them with The Answer on Rosehill Drive and in Peterborough. It was only my second ever gig. I had to lie to get in because I was 12 and it was over 14s, and I was shitting myself. My dad said, "Just lie." And I went, "All right." And they were amazing. Like you say, Richie was so charismatic. The band were just awesome, and yeah, I can only echo what you said. I just want people to still celebrate and enjoy the album because it's just awesome.
No, it's a solid shout. Top two. Getting so serious. Yeah. All right.
Very, very serious.
Of course, people are like, "Okay, no." Yeah. My number two. This is a man that I rate so highly, but again, as we mentioned in the last video, over here again, it may be a different story in America, but over here, nobody's even heard of this guy, let alone the album. It's Philip Sace with Peace Machine. Mm-hmm. Such a great album. This is like, again, for me, it's right up there as like one of the top kind of modern rock, like blues rock albums that are out there today. It's just killer. It's got so many layers. It's so clever. It's just brilliantly done. I mean, guitar work in it's outrageous. It's just really top tier stuff. And nobody's, over here, I mentioned Philip Sace, people don't know who he is. In America, he may be more well known, but in particular, that first album is very strong. So that's my number two, Peace Machine.
Great album, good shout. My number two is one you've already mentioned, and it's the Raconteurs. Stranger. I like echo again everything you've said. It's my biggest thing with this album is I just feel like it's just like just such a musician's kind of album. Like the quality of the writing and is everything I kind of aspire to be, dude. Like it's just killer. Like songs like Only Child and Don't Bother Me, and like, which is a bit Queenie with the vocals and stuff. And it's man, I just think it's such a creative and cool album, and it only sounds like the Raconteurs, and that's such a big compliment for a band that they've got their own sound and nobody's really appreciating how good they are at doing it.
Well, that's the thing for me. It's like you've got such a big figure like Jack White in this band, yet it sounds like Raconteurs. It doesn't.
It doesn't sound like the White Stripes. Doesn't. I mean, it's the big compliment in general for Jack White is that he can mainly go to. Any project he does tends to say it sound like completely different. His solo stuff's very different to the Raconteurs. And I just think it's just a wonderful album in every way. I've got it on vinyl, which we know.
Wow. See, that's big statements.
Listeners, watchers of the vibe will know that if it's on vinyl, then it's a good. How many of these albums have I got on vinyl? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've only got 5 of them.
Only 5, right? So you see, that shows how tough
serious. That shows how tough it is to get it in the collection.
Get in that top 5. So, what is that in the background?
Sorry about that, viewers. That's my cat.
Some bizarre sounds going on there.
It's my cat being a dick. It's per usual. What's your most underrated album?
Yeah.
You don't know? All right, Sam. What's your number one? We'll see if it's
my
the same
number
as the cats.
one. I don't think it's going to be the same. I'll be shocked if it is. my number one is the Black Crowes, Southern Harmony and Musical Companion.
Oh, I remember you showing me this album.
It's their second album. At the time, it was obviously very well received, but over time, it's got a bit lost now. Everybody always cites their first album as the one.
It's like Shake Your Moneymaker.
Yeah, Shake Your Moneymaker. People always go to that one, and the band go to that one as the one. And I retain that their second album is far superior. Obviously, they have the leading single Remedy, which is the one that everybody knows it for. But like, if you look outside of that, there's so much more on it. Whereas most people don't look outside of Remedy.
Yeah.
And it's got so much to it. They move away from that kind of Stones-esque, vibe. And, it's got so many flavors. It's gone very like Southern rock, obviously, hence the title. Very retro-y. And again, it's like, it's one of those that I think if it was released nowadays, particularly with this whole new like retro scene that's come through, people would rate it so much higher than it was. Like for me, it's one of the classic albums for me. it's right up there, and people don't consider it as one of those classic
No.
albums. That's why I put it at number one, because I really think it's top tier. And there's not a weak track on it, and I can listen to it like whenever I want. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those you can just leave it and let it play. It doesn't get old.
I didn't expect it to be your number one, but I think you've shown why it is your number one by how you've spoken of it. You know, I think that you've given it that kind of top tier level in terms
It's aged well. That's a big thing.
That's it.
Well.
Like it's probably better now than it was when it came out. You know?
Yeah.
Even more relevant. Cool. No, I think that's solid. My number one is Hat Trick by the band America. So this is the band that did the song Horse with No Name.
And everybody gets confused with Uncertain Other Band, doesn't it?
Yeah. A lot of people think it's a Clapton song, Horse with No Name, from what I've heard anyway. It's
some people take them for like Neil Young as well.
Yeah, I know you thought it was kind of like a Neil Young thing. So me and Jay bought this record in a charity shop in Hockley in Nottingham, and we had no idea who it was. We didn't know it was the band that did Horse with No Name. We just saw the front cover. I thought these look fucking awesome. It's like 1973. It's like, oh, this has got to be a good album. And at the time, we only had like a little plug-in record player, you know, that didn't have like an amp or anything. It was all built into one. And my mum and dad got it from charity shop. We were living in my nan's bungalow until they passed away. So we took it back and put it on. And from start to finish, it was just, this is awesome. Like, this is amazing. How can people not know about this album? Like, it was unbelievable. Like, the first two albums were reached platinum sales, and this failed to go gold. Like, it was a flop. Like, it was a complete flop. And like, none of the singles did any good. But from start to finish, like, it's genuinely probably in my top 10 favorite albums of all time. Like, I just think it's unbelievable. Songs like Muskrat's Love, the first song, Rainbow Song, She's Gonna Let You Down, and like they do this wonderful song at the end called Goodbye, and it's like it's like the end of the album, and it's like goodbye, goodbye, and it's very much that kind of like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It's very folky, very early 70s, but it's just like you say, similar to you with the Black Crowes, man. There's not a time I wouldn't want to listen to it, and it wouldn't make me smile. Like, I just think it's just wonderful in every possible way. Like, I think it's class, you know.
Yes, that is
Hat Trick by America, my number one. I think both choices are you know, similar, just because it feels like they just don't get the appreciation they deserve for the level of what I think they are and the quality. You know, the amount of time that went into making these albums, man.
Yeah, this is it.
Don't really give it the time they deserve.
Yeah, I think that's the strange thing with a lot of the albums that are on my list. A lot of them have, you know, been forgotten about completely, or, you know, even the whole band has faded away, or, you know, some kind of strange scenario has happened or something. And yeah, it's a weird one. It's very bittersweet, isn't it? Because you think about it.
It's a shame, man.
Yeah, you think, oh man, like what could have been? Because, you know, it's all there.
The songs will always remain.
Exactly.
The songs will always remain.
Yeah, so that is it for our top 10 this week. If you like what we're doing, you can subscribe to us. You'll find every Saturday that we release a podcast. Yes, from 10 a.m. With a new guest. And if you want to find out who that guest is, you can follow our Facebook. And every Wednesday, we will reveal who that guest is.
We will indeed. And if you're watching us on YouTube, which you are, because this is exclusive content to YouTube, then make sure you go down in the little corner, subscribe, click the bell, and then you'll never miss an episode, whether it be of the Extra Vibe or of a full normal podcast show, which comes out on the Saturday. Make sure you click the bell, and then you'll make sure you never miss, and you can become part of the vibe.
Yes. So we will see you on Saturday.